The twin moons of Goran 7 bathed the thick jungle in an eerie lavender glow, casting long, shifting shadows that danced across the underbrush. Drastin, a Selenian biologist, cautiously maneuvered through the dense foliage, his sensory bristles quivering as unfamiliar sounds echoed from every direction. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, something large, lurking just beyond his field of vision. Every rustle of leaves or distant growl sent a fresh wave of tension through his exoskeleton. Beside him, Harper, a human and his reluctant guide, walked casually as if the jungle presented no threat at all. She was hacking away at vines with a machete, whistling some obscure tune Drastin couldn't place, and showing no signs of concern. Her relaxed demeanor irked Drastin. The human seemed disturbingly at ease in an environment that was actively trying to kill them. They had encountered venomous serpents, carnivorous flora, and creatures that used camouflage so effectively that they had nearly walked right into one. But Harper had navigated it all with a calm that baffled him. Drastin, on the other hand, was a bundle of nerves. His 6 legs struggled to navigate the uneven ground, and he found himself glancing around constantly, hyper-aware of the myriad dangers this jungle undoubtedly held. He knew it was foolish to embark on this mission with only a human for company, but he had little choice. Goran 7's ecosystems were too complex, too delicate for the untrained, yet Harper moved through it like it was her backyard. "Watch your step," Harper called over her shoulder without breaking stride. "This place is full of surprises." Drastin hesitated, scanning the ground more carefully. It was Harper who had first warned him about the walking plants, the ones that took root in the skin of their victims before consuming them. The very idea of stepping on one made his antennae twitch with dread. "I find it difficult to comprehend your lack of concern," Drastin muttered. "This planet is volatile, to say the least." Harper chuckled softly. "Oh, I'm concerned, all right. But worry won't help us. Trust me, we're almost to the good part." "I remain unconvinced that anything on this forsaken planet qualifies as good," Drastin grumbled, sidestepping a fern that looked a little too animate for his liking. Harper's cryptic grin did nothing to settle his nerves. She hacked away at a particularly stubborn clump of vines, revealing a small clearing on the other side. Drastin reluctantly followed her into it, his legs feeling leaden with dread. The clearing was unexpectedly serene. A pool of crystal clear water lay at its center, surrounded by towering rock formations covered in thick moss. For a moment, Drastin allowed himself a breath of relief. It was almost peaceful, a stark contrast to the oppressive jungle they had been wading through. But then his sensory bristles stiffened. There was something off about the air, a subtle vibration, like the planet itself was holding its breath. Drastin's antennae flared wide in alarm. "Something's wrong," he hissed, scanning the perimeter. "There is a large predator nearby. We need to." "Yeah, I know," Harper said nonchalantly, dropping her pack by the water's edge and stretching her arms. Drastin froze, eyes widening. You know." Before she could answer, the ground trembled with a low, reverberating growl. Drastin whirled around to see a shadow emerge from the jungle. A creature stepped into the clearing, massive, its hulking form dwarfing even the trees around it. It moved with predatory grace, its sleek fur rippling as it approached. A quadruped, its massive fanged jaws were framed by piercing, glowing eyes that locked directly onto Drastin. Drastin's blood ran cold. "By the stars above, it's an apex predator," he shrieked, stumbling backward. "We need to retreat immediately." Harper glanced at the creature and shrugged. "Oh, that's just Rook. Don't worry about him." "Don't worry about. Are you insane? That thing is going to devour us whole." "Nah," Harper said, walking toward the beast casually. "He's harmless, mostly." Drastin felt faint. His legs quivered, torn between running and collapsing in place. Mostly. Rook, the apex predator, as Harper had called it, sniffed the air, its amber eyes narrowing as it approached. Drastin was convinced it was calculating the best way to make a meal of him. He skittered backward, his panic rising with each of the creature's thunderous thumps. Harper, on the other hand, knelt down and clicked her tongue a few times. To Drastin's horror, the massive beast obediently lowered its head toward her. "What are you doing?" Drastin cried, his voice cracking with terror. Harper casually scratched behind Rook's ear, like one would with a domesticated animal. "You can pet him if you want," she said, flashing Drastin a smile. "He's a big softy." Pet. Drastin's eyes bulged in disbelief. "You expect me to pet that? It's a killing machine." "Sure," as Harper said, unfazed. "But he's also my buddy, aren't you, Rook?" The massive predator rumbled a deep, resonating growl that Drastin swore could shatter bones, and yet it leaned into Harper's hand, its giant head lowering in what seemed to be contentment. Drastin was completely paralyzed by the impossibility of the scene before him. This was an apex predator, a beast designed by evolution to dominate the food chain, and Harper was treating it like some kind of oversized pet. How is this possible?" Drastin managed, his mandibles clattering as he tried to form words. "That creature should have torn you apart." Harper smiled and gave Rook a firm pat on the side. "Rook and I go way back. Found him as a cub, wounded and abandoned. Nursed him back to health. Now we look out for each other." "You domesticated an apex predator," Drastin said, utterly dumbfounded. "Sort of," Harper replied. "He's still wild, but we've got an understanding. Long as you don't smell like prey, he won't bother you." Drastin's sensory bristles twitched as he processed that last sentence. "Smell like prey." Harper grinned mischievously. "Yeah, why no? The usual. Fear, panic, that kind of thing." I smell like prey, don't I?" Drastin stammered, frantically checking his scent markers. Before Harper could answer, the bushes around them rustled. Drastin tensed immediately, his heart pounding as he sensed movement. His antennae picked up more vibrations, many of them. From the shadows, a pack of small, wiry creatures emerged. They were bipedal, with sharp talons and beady red eyes that glinted with hunger. Voraxes. A chill ran down Drastin's spine. He had read about them: opportunistic pack hunters, notorious for their vicious attacks on anything they considered weak or isolated, and right now they were eyeing him like he was their next meal. "I think you're about to find out," Harper said, standing slowly as the Voraxes closed in. "Those things love hunting in groups." The pack began to circle the clearing, their movements fluid and coordinated. Drastin's legs locked in place, his mind racing as he tried to formulate a plan. But there was no escape, not with 6 Voraxes closing in. He was as good as dead. Then Harper let out a sharp whistle. Rook's head snapped up, his amber eyes immediately locking onto the threat. In an instant, the massive predator was on his feet, positioning himself between the pack and his companions. The Voraxes, suddenly faced with a predator much larger than themselves, hesitated. One let out a sharp hiss, and the pack briefly reconsidered their odds. "Stay behind him," Harper instructed, motioning for Drastin to move back. "Rook's got this." Drastin, still frozen in shock, skittered behind Rook, his legs trembling. The enormous predator advanced on the Voraxes with a deep, menacing growl. The air vibrated with the sheer power of it. The Voraxes, sensing they had lost the element of surprise, exchanged glances before slinking back into the jungle, defeated. As the last of the pack disappeared into the underbrush, the tension in the clearing dissipated. Rook let out a satisfied huff and sat back down by the water's edge, as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. Harper grinned, walking up to her oversized companion and giving him a firm pat. "Good boy, Rook. Knew you wouldn't let me down." Drastin's legs buckled as he slumped to the ground, still reeling from the experience. His mind was a whirl of disbelief and awe. He had studied ecosystems and predator-prey dynamics for years, but nothing had prepared him for this. A human, casually strolling through one of the deadliest ecosystems in the galaxy, with an apex predator as her companion? "You use that creature as protection?" Drastin finally asked, his voice shaking. "Protection? Company? You name it," Harper said with a wink. "Pretty handy, don't you think?" Drastin could only stare. I do not understand. That predator should be a terror to all species." Rook's different," Harper said with a shrug. "He's family." Drastin glanced at Rook, who had resumed lounging by the water, his massive form seeming almost peaceful now. Despite his terror, Drastin couldn't help but feel a strange admiration for the human. She had tamed a nightmare and made it an ally. It was incomprehensible. And yet there it was. As the jungle around them began to darken with the setting sun, Drastin had the sinking feeling that his journey with Harper was only going to get more bizarre from here. He wasn't sure if his heart could handle it, but something inside him was curious. The twilight deepened, casting long, purple shadows across the jungle as the twin moons of Goran 7 began their slow ascent. Drastin's heart rate finally started to slow, though he still felt a persistent tremor in his limbs. He cast a wary glance toward Rook, who lay peacefully at the water's edge, seemingly oblivious to the life-threatening encounter they had just faced. Harper, too, was unfazed, rummaging through her pack, as if the jungle wasn't teeming with dangers that could descend upon them at any moment. For a long moment, Drastin was silent, his mind racing to reconcile the day's events. As a xenobiologist, he had encountered all manner of bizarre and terrifying creatures, but never had he seen a human and outsider to this planet exert such casual dominance over its apex predator. His understanding of the laws of nature was being tested to the breaking point, and Harper didn't even seem to notice. Human Drastin began, his voice shaky as he finally spoke. This. Rook. How can you be so sure he won't, at any given moment, revert to his natural instincts and kill us both? Harper looked up from her pack and shrugged, that infuriatingly relaxed smile still on her face. I'm not sure, she said, and Drastin's antennae bristled at the casualness of the statement. But like I said, Rook and I have an understanding. He knows I helped him when he was hurt. I guess you could say we trust each other. Drastin stared at her, his mandibles twitching in disbelief. Trust, he echoed, the word foreign in this context. You are attempting to apply a moral concept, a concept rooted in sentient reasoning, to a predator. Harper chuckled as she dug into a pouch and pulled out some dried meat, tossing a piece over to Rook, who caught it in midair with a soft, almost gentle chomp. Trust isn't just for people, Doc. Animals get it too. It's not as weird as you think. Drastin watched the massive beast crunch down on the food, but surely his instincts, his biology, compel him to hunt, to consume too. Yeah, they do, Harper interrupted, shrugging again. But instincts aren't everything. Rook knows he's got a good thing with me. I feed him, take care of him, and in return he keeps me safe. It's a pretty sweet deal for both of us. Drastin's mind whirred, struggling to process her words. The intricate web of predator-prey dynamics he had studied for years had been shattered in an instant. Harper and Rook's relationship defied everything he knew about the natural order. It wasn't supposed to work this way. Predator and prey were governed by ancient rules that were apparently little more than suggestions to humans. But what of the Voraxes, Drastin asked, trying to regain some semblance of control over the conversation. They were prepared to strike. And yet they fled. Was it fear? Does Rook? Harper cut him off again, this time more seriously. Yeah, they were afraid of Rook, sure. But here's the thing about fear, it only works if you've got the teeth to back it up. Rook's got the teeth, and the pack knew it. She tossed another piece of meat to the lounging beast, her tone now more thoughtful. But fear's tricky. You can't rely on it forever. Sooner or later, something bigger or badder comes along. Or worse, something that doesn't feel fear at all. Drastin's mandibles clicked nervously. You speak as if from experience. Harper gave a short, dry laugh. Humans learned that lesson the hard way. There are a lot of things out there that don't scare easy. You've got to find something stronger than fear to survive. Drastin pondered her words. His people, the Silanians, had always relied on logic, reason, and a strict adherence to the natural laws. Fear was a primal emotion, useful in guiding behavior but ultimately something to be avoided. Yet humans seemed to embrace fear, understand it, harness it, and at times defy it entirely. Harper stood, brushing dirt off her pants as she glanced at the darkening sky. All right, Doc, we should head out. We've got a long hike ahead if we want to reach the next valley before the nocturnals come out. Drastin hesitated, glancing around at the encroaching shadows. There are more dangerous creatures. Harper shot him a grin. "Oh yeah, the jungle really comes alive at night. But don't worry, we'll be fine." Drastin eyed Rook, who was stretching lazily as he stood up. The giant beast let out a rumbling yawn before padding over to Harper, towering over her even in his relaxed state. "Fine," Drastin muttered, not convinced. "I suppose I have little choice." Together they left the clearing, Harper leading the way while Rook walked calmly beside her, his enormous frame moving with lethal grace through the jungle. Drastin followed behind, his mind still reeling from the day's events. Every step brought new questions, and he found himself increasingly intrigued by this human, by her strange bond with a creature that should have been her doom. They walked in relative silence for a time, the jungle growing darker and the sounds of the night creatures slowly rising around them. Drastin's antennae twitched constantly as his sensory bristles picked up movements in the shadows, things slithering and crawling, unseen but ever present. But Harper seemed unfazed, her pace steady as she hacked through vines and underbrush. "You know," Drastin said at last, unable to hold back his curiosity any longer, "you humans are truly baffling." Harper glanced back at him, eyebrow raised. "Oh yeah? How's that?" Drastin's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "In all my years studying the intergalactic species catalog, I've never encountered any species that displays such blatant disregard for the natural order. You defy the most basic principles of survival and evolution. You tame predators, you thrive in environments that should destroy you. And you do so with such ease." Harper gave a soft laugh. "It's not always easy. You've seen what it's like out here. And yet you show no fear," Drastin pressed. "Even now, in the heart of this jungle, surrounded by predators and dangers I can hardly fathom, you are calm." Harper shrugged. "We've had to be. You don't get far in the galaxy by panicking. There's always going to be something bigger, stronger, meaner. So you learn to adapt. You learn to work with the danger, not against it." Drastin considered that. And Rook, he is part of this. Adaptability. Harper smiled fondly at the massive beast walking beside her. "Yeah, you could say that. He's taught me as much as I've taught him. There's a bond there, a kind of understanding you can't force." Drastin fell silent again, his thoughts swirling. He had come to Goran 7 to study its ecosystems, to catalog its life forms, but now he found himself studying something far more mysterious: the humans themselves. They were a species that defied expectations, that lived on the edge of chaos and somehow made it their ally. As they pressed deeper into the jungle, the night grew darker, the sounds of predators lurking just beyond sight. But Drastin felt a strange new confidence, something that had been foreign to him earlier in the day. Perhaps it was Harper's steady presence, or the massive predator walking calmly beside her, but he felt, for the first time since arriving on Goran 7, that they might just survive this. They reached a ridge overlooking the next valley, the view vast and wild beneath the moon's glow. Harper stopped, leaning against a tree, as she took it in. "There's the valley. We'll camp here for the night." Drastin glanced down into the dark expanse, shadows shifting as nocturnal creatures stirred below. "And you're certain we'll be safe?" Harper gave a confident nod. "With Rook around, we'll be fine. Trust me." Drastin looked at the apex predator, now settling down beside Harper as she prepared their camp. Against all logic, he found himself nodding. The jungle was still dangerous, still full of threats, but with Harper and Rook, those threats seemed manageable. And for reasons he couldn't fully explain, he trusted her. Trusted them both. As the jungle whispered around them, and the night grew thick with shadows, Drastin realized something. It wasn't just the jungle he was studying now. It was the strange, fascinating bond between human and predator, between fear and survival. And in that bond he saw a new kind of order, one not bound by rules, but by trust. The stars twinkled above as they settled in for the night, the jungle humming with life, and Drastin, against all reason, found himself at peace. For perhaps the first time on this wild, dangerous planet, he felt something unexpected. He felt safe.